I'm live. Hello, everyone. So amazing to be at API Days again, albeit virtually. And hello to those on the virtual platform. And of course, hello to those that might be IRL. Or if you're watching the video, the recording, hello from the past. I hope you are well there too. Hello, my name is Developer Steve, and it's so amazing to be here today. Before I get underway, I'd just like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners on the lands on which we meet today, including the Wurundjeri people, who are the traditional owners here in Narromine, where I'm presenting from in the New South Wales Central West. Also, just wanted to do, how great's the conference been so far? If you are watching the recording in the future, please go check out those keynotes, because that first keynote this morning on AI stuff, like, amazing. So if you are watching from the future, then please go check it out, because it was amazingly great. And I hope you enjoyed this one too, of course, and the rest of the ones from today as well. I think that was it for my opening. So I do have a disclaimer before we start, and I've got a lot to cover, a lot of fun stuff, a lot of geeky fun stuff. And to begin with, my disclaimer at the start is I love developer jokes, or tech jokes as I like to refer them, because not all of them are developer related. Most of them are, because I am a developer. We'll get into that. But I do like developer jokes, or tech jokes. So I always love opening with these. These are open source, like is most of the tech industry. So please share this amongst your friends, because it's important we always keep smiling. Anyway, how do fallen trees check for errors? Via log files. Oh, see, so bad. I didn't say they were good tech jokes, but again, pass it around because they are open source. If you do have any comments, emojis, or questions, please drop them into the chat, or reach out to me on all the socials. My name is Developer Steve. Funny story, actually legally too. So I've been a developer advocate or developer evangelist for many years now. Full-time since 2014, but part-time kind of before that. And for some amazing companies like PayPal, Braintree, for Xero, for Telstra, for IBM. And I currently do this for a company called Lumigo, and we do observability on serverless and containerized environments. But we'll get into that a little bit later. So I've been playing around with some fun SDK stuff, which is why you're here, of course. Anyway, back to my story. Because I've been doing developer advocacy for so long, and for me, I've been writing code for so many years now, since the age of 8. Those many moons, whole other story. But yeah, everyone started calling me Developer Steve. I've been around the world 16 times, doing conferences all over the world, and of course now we do this hybrid format, be it virtually, be it IRL. And yeah, I've connected been able to connect with all these amazing tech communities throughout the world, and people just started calling me Developer Steve. So when I got married in 2018, I legally changed my married name because we combined our surnames. So Cooper plus Houchin became Coochin, which is my married surname. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to make my middle name Developer Steve. Turns out you can do that, and I did. So here we are. That's actually my wedding photo in the top right of my slides. That fun fact, that cake actually had its own mobile number, and the guests were able to change the colors on the cake just by sending an SMS. And that was thanks to some amazing APIs, which is kind of where this story starts. Because as a developer, like, I love APIs. These are literally the things that allow me to build out some of the most amazing experiences, be it for payments, be it for text messaging, for cakes, because I mean, you always love having cakes with their own mobile number, right? Whole other talk in its own right. Actually, that was kind of fun, that whole project. And as a developer, like, these are the things I love building out and being able to integrate with. And particularly as a developer evangelist over the years, being able to represent brands or companies that have some of the most phenomenal, like, developer experiences in the world. APIs become the pivotal point to their platform because it allows users, developers, and, well, anyone that can pick up an IDE or pick up a code editor, being able to build out some really cool experiences really, really easily. And for me, like, as all those things, developer evangelism is a bit like wearing the many hats of an entire company sometimes, because you're everything to everyone for every reason. But for me, like, a good API needs a few fundamental things to, well, be a good API. Actually, at API Days Hong Kong recently, one of the speakers said, your most amazing API, you could have the most amazing API in the world, but it means nothing if you don't have some fundamental sort of things built into it. Which is essentially true because, and I've worked with so many APIs in the past where like they're not documented properly, or they don't have one of the things we're going to be talking about today, SDKs. Anyway, I'm jumping ahead of myself because I have these as points on the slide, but of course, the most fundamental thing is it needs to provide some type of valid service. It could be payments, it could be text messaging, it could be, well, just about anything you want, as long as it provides some type of value to the people integrating it and their end users. It's one of the fundamental backbones of an API or a service or a platform that has an API even. This one, I could go into many stories about being well documented. So many times I have been given an API as part of a project because this needs to be integrated because business reasons, be it client or whatever, and I have to backwards engineer how it works. Even the fields that it's able to like consume as part of the endpoint, the data I have to send through to it to actually use it, or the request data I have to send to that particular API to get information back from it. Unless that is documented, developers aren't mind readers. That's all I'm saying on that, because I could literally be here for days talking about that one. Integration options goes without saying because again, you want the end technical users to be able to consume and adapt depending on what they need to do with it. Totally makes fundamental sense. And of course, the most important thing and why we're here today is SDKs, because I've seen this go a few ways before, but essentially you don't want your technical end users having to rebuild the world every time they need to do something. So many times I've seen platforms kind of release one or two different SDK or language SDKs or platform SDKs. And then there's other languages which users fundamentally want and are asking for that they just can't do it. Important to mention here too is there's a lot of community SDKs out there which come about because there is that need for that particular language or platform to have integration points. And then there's sometimes some disparity between what the business rolls out as part of that API and the changes they make, and then having to notify the community so that they can get everything updated in time, et cetera, as well. So, and shout out to those communities doing amazing work. Companies, please work very closely with them. Anyway, so one of the things, and this all came about literally because like I've worked alongside API services and platforms before that didn't have SDKs. And as a developer advocate, developer evangelist, working with community and also with the company trying to foster that adoption and that integrate those integration points, and becomes a means, and having to build out and support multiple SDKs, which escalate very quickly. Let me tell you, it starts with 6 on one API product and it ends up with 45 before you know it. And 45 SDKs is a lot for one particular person to be doing. So anyway, this is one of the services I happened across literally as the need arose as I was building out and supporting a multiple of SDK sets many years ago. This is one of the services I originally started playing with called Open API Generator. What I love about this is, well, there's a few slides that kind of talk about that, but essentially it's one of the most amazing open source projects I think I've ever happened across on the internet. That's a big call. Totally worth checking out. We're going to explore why. What I love the most about this is just how adaptable it is and the way it's able to ingest not only Swagger 2, Swagger 1 specs. Just a side note there, if you are on Swagger 1, please update. Please update. You'd be doing yourself a favor. Whole other talk in its own right, and hopefully some people over the next few days talk about that. If they are, please go check it out, particularly if you're using it. So that was just a side note. Anyway, Open API Generator has a local CLI version, which is essentially where I started using it. So you can brew install if you're on a Mac and be able to ingest an API spec really easily and output from multiple of languages really quickly. This is a deployable service, which is what we're going to be looking at a little bit today, because you can actually build it into your pipelines as well, which is really cool because I love automation. So, and again, if you managed to see that first keynote this morning, or if you're watching the recording in the future, please go check that out because that was a great talk. Like I said, it does support OpenAPI and Swagger straight out of the box. Like, literally don't have to do anything with it. And this is one of the things I love about those API spec formats is industry standard. Always for the win, because it allows things like this to be able to be built out amazingly quick and industry supported, which is really cool. Important to note here too, this originally started as a Swagger generator as well, and then later moved into OpenAPI, completely migrated to the OpenAPI generator too, but it does still support Swagger 1 and Swagger 2. This is my favorite bit. So it does have this has been great, like watching the communities like these grow over the years. Oh, that makes me sound really old. Anyway, watching languages and platforms like this grow over the years. This originally started with a much smaller list, and now there's a lot of integration options. So essentially, you can take that Swagger spec or that OpenAPI spec and output into all these different formats. And when I said earlier that this was one of the best open source communities I've seen on the internet for a while. Literally, there's the core team that maintain the core OpenAPI generators project, and then each one of these languages and platforms all have their own sub teams as part of that. Some of them sort of branch through a few different ones. I'm also going to mention here too is if you are looking to use this, or you are using this particular this open source solution, please contribute back where you can, because this whole community does amazing work, and if you can contribute back to that, please do. Even if it's just reading some docs or doing some tests on a release candidate, it all helps them. So please contribute back. You probably do. Thank you for your work. And if you don't, please help me. Yeah, I just love mentioning that, because groups like this change industries with the way that they can generate all these amazing things that basically help people integrate with your API. It's also one thing I did also want to mention here too is each one of these languages use a moustache template format. So by default, the output that comes out from your spec that you throw at it it's a little default. The formatting won't be great. There'll be little things that just annoy you that you want to fix. And the good news is you can, because you can edit the moustache template and make it your own. Square, for example, were using this for a while. I don't know whether they still are, but they were using this platform for a while to output some of their SDKs, and you could actually find their edited moustache templates on their GitHub, which also was cool because it meant their community could submit changes that would then flow on to their SDK generation, and it was permanent. Well, mostly permanent till the next change. Anyway, I just wanted to mention that because this was something that kind of drove me crazy in the early days, but once I sort of got a handle on, and this is all really well documented on their website, once I got a handle on how this worked, then yeah, it was really easy to build out. That was the point I just talked about. Jumped ahead of myself. So the CLI itself, I'm not going to go too much into that. It's generally pretty easy to use. You can install it locally. You can also build this into pipeline if you had this running on a server somewhere. There's some tinkery, hacky ways to do it, detecting when a new spec's available and batch outputting, et cetera, et cetera. Like I said, it outputs really, really easily. The way I originally started to automate this many, many moons ago was to actually build out some bash scripts, which actually are still on GitHub as well. Each language that you want to output for has its own configuration options as well. So what I did with my bash script was I had configuration options for the languages that I was interested in supporting, and I would configure each one depending on how they needed to be configured and how I wanted them to look. And my bash script would scan the folder that all the configuration files are in, and then output each language accordingly, also ingesting the configuration options for each. It was hacky, really, really hacky, but it actually worked. For the most part, it worked. Wasn't pretty. Which brings us to the topic of the day, SDKs as a service, because you can actually deploy this containerized, which is really, really cool. So I've been running some tests on this recently because I still love SDKs. Well, I love APIs. That's why I'm here. That's why you're here. I built I actually used some of my tech jokes to build out some basic APIs to do some testing with, using API Gateway, which was kind of easy to use. Behind it, I had a simple Lambda, and then also like a DynamoDB instance running, which Lambda connect to, just with a list of jokes in there. Well, jokes and responses, because you want them timed sometimes with your APIs. So yeah, that was the thing. Then of course I had SDK generator running inside AWS ECS, just as inside a container, which is, well, what we've just been talking about as well. It actually runs fairly well in there, but we'll get into that in a moment. Well, essentially how the automation for this works is you take out an API spec out of API Gateway, dump that into S3. As soon as that's recognized, it gets basically thrown at the ECS containerized SDK as a service instance, and an SDK comes out for the languages that you are interested in supporting, which of course would be all the main ones, Node.js, Python, etc. Now, one of the lessons I learned, even supporting sort of multiple SDK generations over the years, is testing is important. Actually, that's a fundamental rule with any software development or any API or any development in general. Actually, testing is important. So, and I learned this the hard way with SDKs, because this one time I didn't quite have there was a lot of them to test. So I didn't really have a lot of time to test them, and therefore they may have broken a little bit. Incidentally, side story time. Incidentally, this was also a great way to test who was using the said SDKs that were being outputted, because when they broke, we got a lot of emails and people saying, hey, the SDK is no longer working. Anyway, trust me, you don't want to find out that way, because then I have to rush test builds all over again. Whole other story. Hopefully this presentation helps you avoid that, because you can take that SDK and drop it into a Lambda automatically and run some tests on it really, really easily to make sure that everything is working as it intendedly should. Of course, the other way to be able to detect how this entire cycle is running is to use distributed tracing. Where's my meme? There it is. Distributed trace all the things. So this is where distributed tracing also helps, because you can monitor everything end to end. Now, for those that aren't familiar with distributed tracing, it's essentially the nice organization of all your multiple of services. And being cloud adopters as we are now, because cloud brings about its scalability and, well, portability too, because you can virtually span clouds. But working cloud native in particular allows you to build out on some amazing services that are ever changing and ever growing. The problem is, particularly when you're looking cross-region, is that one particular service, be it an API service or a Lambda or a database, etc., that one particular service that's going to send you that warning there's an error alert, or things just break at like 2 a.m. on probably a Saturday or a Friday morning, because why wouldn't it? Murphy's Law, whole other talk. That one particular service is a little bit tricky to trace, because in scalability terms, like you could have 50 or 60 of that particular instance, depending how your platform's architected, of course. But this is where distributed tracing can help, because it's able to identify where those issues are occurring and notify you of the particular place that it's actually happening in. So if you take that one bucket with maybe the wrong type of permissioning on it, or it's trying to store a particular response from an integration that happened 3 steps ago in your entire like cloud native process flow, distributed tracing is able to identify where exactly in that mapping where that error is occurring. So, and the best news is, like, using OpenTelemetry, which is amazingly new standard being adopted industry-wide now for tracing and handling and logging within complex cloud-native systems. It's able to pick up without needing the deployment of a particular agent server or agent application. Remember those days when you deploy to, I don't know, an EC2 instance or some type of server that you've got running somewhere, and you have to make sure that particular agent's running so that you can log into this other system and be able to see where things are. Yeah, all that's gone now. Don't hate that. It's amazingly cool. Anyway, how this helps with our instances, you can see there, I've got my dev jokes example. See, I would have done this live, but limited time. So, oh, wait, spoilers. Anyway, we'll get into that. There's a blog post thing. Anyway, what I love here is I'm able to, with that API I've deployed using Lumigo, for example, I'm able to not only get that particular route, but I'm able to see the number invocations right through from, it already knows that there's a Lambda running too. Again, agentless makes it super cool because it's able to detect that whole trace end-to-end for the different services that particular API might be using. So I can scan down to that one dev jokes get API. Also, just going to point out here, my tech jokes may not be, well, they may be a little bit bad sometimes, but there's definitely never any errors and it never falls flat. See, this API confirms that because there's no errors. The best part here is I can also see every invocation that's occurring for that particular API route. And again, like this is just a basic API with a Lambda and then a DynamoDB hooked up to it as well. Also, just going to highlight here, not only that, oops, hit the wrong button. Sometimes my dev jokes also get a bit of a icy reception, as you can see here with this cold start. Which is happening with this Lambda. We got some really good write-ups on how to, actually we have a cold start guide coming out soon. So if you are watching from the future, please go check out our cold start guide and how you can fix this, because there's actually some ways to make that even quicker in its response time. Whole other talk. The important thing here is sometimes my dev jokes do get a bit of a cold reception. There we go. I can almost hear the brum-bumps now. The other part of our SDK as a service journey here was, of course, the containerized SDK generator, which you can also trace its performance on as well. As you can see here, there may be times, particularly when you're doing a deployment, that you might want to increase resources on the cluster that you're running the container on, because you're going to need different, well, you're going to need more engine to be able to run all the outputs you're going to need as part of your SDK generation. You can also spin up a multiple of tasks, which of course are easily detectable as well. But this is why distributed tracing can help with this sort of stuff, because you're able to detect not only inside the container, but you can run this as part of the application as well and get some even more granular data out from your containerized environments. And of course, the last part to this was the SDK itself, which we're able to essentially consume our own API, and that essentially brings this entire thing full circle because, well, we've literally gone full circle. So you're actually able to detect from the Lambda the invocations that are occurring from the application itself and be able to, well, fix it, because you're getting like terrible response times. You can go backwards and forwards between the API and the SDK being generated, and improve that for the end user, because we want to make sure our technical users are looked after. Just quickly, when I said end-to-end trace, here's an example of that, because you can actually detect SNS and SQS as well, including like the full transit flow of that one request coming in and how it's being handled across a multiple of systems, which is amazingly cool. Anyway, just some quick takeaways before we wrap up. Please always design APIs for a developer user's consumption. Totally don't be afraid to go get feedback from your technical audience and people consuming your APIs. Always rinse, repeat, and refine. So always looking to make that experience just that little bit better, piece by piece. And before you know it, it'll be the greatest service in the world. There you go. I think that was the song. And on top of that, make sure you monitor and trace all the things. Again, it's about building that experience out and making sure you're not consuming huge amounts of resources as part of your SDK deployment. Again, you want to make sure that the API you design is easy for users to be able to use, integrate, and build all those amazing things for. Just quickly, and I mentioned a few times in this talk, if you've got sort of looking into just how distributed tracing can help you, please check out our blog. There's some amazing write-ups in there, including how to deal with cold starts. There is a really, really good cold start guide coming soon. I read through it again yesterday. It's shaping up nicely. But yeah, these articles are designed to help you build out some amazing experiences and make your developer integrators, technical integrators, love your service even more. So worth checking out. And just finally, please remember to use your tech superpowers for good and be excellent to each other. Thank you very much.